Yeah, they hit us up, which was like the craziest day of my life. Des, my business partner and COO, called me. It's like screaming and was like, Sephora just emailed us. They want a meeting. And then, obviously like everyone's screaming. The whole team is like, like losing their like house is on fire. We're losing our mind. We're like ready to pop bottles. And then we're like, oh, holy hell. We have a lot of work to do.
Hey everyone, welcome to Female Founder World. Today's chat is with Remi Brixton. She's the founder of Freck Beauty. They are the first company to bring out a freckle pen, and it kind of kicked off after a bit of a botched Kickstarter campaign that went viral for all of the wrong reasons, but has turned into this incredible company that Remi has seen through from one product into a full clean beauty range that's now stocked in Sephora. So I'll let her give you her insights in her own words and we'll kick off. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. How I generally like to kick off is just with asking you to kind of talk us through what your brand is, what you guys are doing, and maybe some anchor points to let people know like where you're at in the kind of entrepreneurship story, like how big the brand is, where are you stocked, that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for having me, Jasmine. My name is Remi. I'm so excited to be here. I am the founder and CEO of Freck Beauty. Freck Beauty is a new disruptive, which I hate that word, but we are disruptive, clean beauty brand. And we're most known for creating the world's first cosmetic freckle. And since then, we've expanded into clean skincare, clean makeup, and we are recently launched as of March of this year. So I guess it's not that recently, it's just time is flying right now at Sephora.com indoors, which is super exciting. And to tell you guys a little bit about where we are right now with the brand, we're kicking ass at Sephora, which is so exciting. We have a wonderful team there and we're loving the partnership, continuing to focus on driving our e-com, of course. We recently, end of last year, we closed our seed round. So we're kind of between rounds right now and just growing crazy fast. It's hard to keep up. Our team is about 10 to 12 right now outside of contractors. And we're hoping to have 20 employees, or we're on track to have 20 employees by mid next year. So lots going on. We're in the hockey stick right now.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Awesome. Sounds like a really great time to catch you and kind of, talk through your story and where things are going. But how did you come up with the idea for Freck Beauty, and what were you doing before that? What was your path to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I love this question. So I'm actually by trade and by education an interior designer, which I think has really helped with the design and development of Freck Beauty. And before that, I had done a short stint at college before I pivoted to interior design in branding. So both of those together, it's funny, like all the little steps that seem kind of disjointed when you're finding yourself in your career end up coming together. At least they did for me. But I think they do for a lot of people. And to tell you about how I came up with the idea. So I wish this was a more like enticing story, but I'm from Seattle. And so I'm very pale, and growing up in Seattle, there's not a lot of sun. And when I was a kid, I just was so obsessed with freckles and envious of people who had them. I didn't have any. So if you look at my childhood drawings, like the plants have freckles and the dogs have freckles and the sun has freckles. Like I just have always loved them and thought they were gorgeous. And then I've lost track of time now just because we're working so fast. But when I was in college, I kind of had the idea. I was like, I wish that I was getting ready for a night out. And I was like, I wish that I could put on freckles. And then flash forward, years later, I actually told the idea to this woman who later ended up becoming a mentor of mine. And she had decades of experience in cosmetic manufacturing. And she was really the first person to kind of like spark the confidence that this might actually be a good idea. And she said, if you're serious about this, here's the first 5 steps. And I just kind of kept putting the puzzle together from there.
Amazing. Okay. So what were those first 5 steps? How did you get it off the ground once you had a bit more confidence in the idea?
So one thing that I did, not to her suggestion, but one thing that I did on my own, which I thought really also built up the confidence, was I did a Google consumer survey and I spent like $50, which at the time was a lot of money for me personally. And kind of sent out, it's like when you're like trying to read a WWD article or something or New York Times article and you have to answer a couple Google survey questions. And I asked people a set of questions being, do you like freckles? Would you wear freckles? And then also kind of like a cost analysis of like how much people would pay to have freckles as a cosmetic product. So that was the first thing that I did independently, which the results were like people wanted freckles. And I was like, whoa, this just isn't just me and my close knit group of friends in East LA. And then after that, it was really about, sourcing, trying to find a lab partner. But even before that, like product development, like, is it henna, like trying to really think outside of the box. There was one prototype that I made that was like a potato stamp. So really just like kind of getting your hands dirty and thinking about how you might even try to tackle first a market product and then lab hunting and kind of like trying to put together any points of difference in such a crowded market. So those were like the first steps.
And early on, how did you fund the business? Were you just bootstrapping? Did you, do a friends and family round? How did you kind of fund it to get it off the ground?
Yeah, so I had actually run a Kickstarter, and the Kickstarter didn't fund, but this was in 2015, and I think it was like too early for people to accept freckles in the beauty space because at the time it was like very, laser treatments were super hot, ridding yourself of any like skin texture flaws. If you're listening, I'm air quoting right now, flaws, just imperfections, which I don't really, that's not my jam. But so it was really not the right time at the time. And the Kickstarter actually went viral and, but like not in a good way. Like it was like, what is this crazy girl doing? This is insane. Nobody wants freckles. But from that, so it didn't fund, but I was lucky enough that a small, couple thousand of those followers came, people who tried to back the Kickstarter came over to Instagram and they kept DMing me like, every week being like, do you have any backstock? Do you have anything? Like, I love your product. So that also really kept me going. But from the Kickstarter, I did get introduced to somebody who ended up introducing me to an investor. And I gave up a ridiculous amount of equity for $15,000. But this was at the very end of the PD process. So I was just like, partnering with the labs, trying to find somebody with the lowest minimum order quantity, and really just like focusing on product development. And then I was like, if I figure this out, hopefully the money will come somehow. And it did. I ended up buying those investors out shortly thereafter. And then after that, this is still the very beginning phases of the brand. I was bootstrapping it. I was working 2 jobs, one of which was to pay for myself and one of which was to pay for Freck. Because once I launched, I was like, oh, wait, crap, I have to like keep this stuff in stock and like have money for that. It doesn't just like, it's not like $5 out, $20 in, as the math in my head at the time had worked. And then I actually, because the early relationship with the investors that I brought out was not a great one, I ended up taking on quite a bit of personal debt. And I used PayPal and Shopify and a couple other like low-hanging debt fruits to fund the business until we were at a point where we had enough proof of concept where I wasn't giving away like 20% of the business for a very, very small amount of money.
And once you had that kind of first product, what did you do to get those early customers and get traction in the really early days?
Yeah. So this is kind of a different story than a lot of people have because I did have those, couple thousand followers from Kickstarter. So they were obviously eager to get their hands on the product. So we had like a pretty successful initial launch and then immediately plateaued. And the product, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's a little, it's a teeny tiny, it's called Freck OG. It's about half the size of your pinky. It's maybe the smallest cosmetic product in the world. And it looks kind of like an eyeliner brush that sits into a pot of formula. And it's so small, but it lasts so long. Because if you think about how much product it takes to make a freckle, it's like nothing. So those people didn't come back for like a year. So then I was in the year of like, oh gosh, like how do I get new customers? And it stayed like that for a really, really, really long time. And then finally, I kind of just like had a a kick myself in the butt moment where I was like, okay, like I was so tired, working all these jobs and waking up at 6 a.m. to pack orders and all of the stuff that I'm sure everybody listening is so familiar with. And I hear you. It is so hard, but it's worth it down the road, promise. I had a kick myself in the butt moment where I was like, I had gone through so many ups and downs of like the Kickstarter failed, then going back to PD, totally new product, bringing it out, kind of successful launch, and then immediately plateaued into like, maybe we're making like $30 a day type of deal, like super low sales. So I was like, dude, Rem, like you get 6 more months of this because you can't put your entire life and your career on hold. This is now like, 3 or 4 years into the project and keep spending my money and like putting everything into this project. And then I started reaching out to influencers and they were just so excited about the product. They'd never seen anything like it, that it was like an organic show and tell moment. This is also in 2018. So it was a totally different influencer landscape than it is right now. But yeah, really, like I would not have a business without the support of the influencer community and the Freck fam, for sure.
Wow. Okay. So I'm really interested to know, as the business has grown, you've come such a long way from, something that you've got a few thousand people following you on Instagram and kind of these lags in sales, and now you're stocked in Sephora. How have you as a founder kind of upskilled as you've gone through this? Because it's a very different thing to be running a small business and being scrappy to like actually being the CEO of a fully fledged VC-backed company.
Yeah. Oh, it's hard. It's kind of just like, I am super transparent that I go to therapy. Like I have been going to therapy twice a week for 8 years. I think it's a huge, personal development process, and it's something that anybody who goes to therapy or just, education of any kind, it's like you can always do better. You can always push yourself. And then, obviously take a break when you need to, but like you can always grow. And I think one of the challenges for us right now is that I am still really in the weeds and it's really hard for me to pull up into that CEO position. So just to be totally honest, like it really is a challenge, especially for somebody like me who like, I love the like hands-on, like even like testing concepts for photo shoots. I love being that person, but it is really hard to like distance yourself and realize that like your favorite vertical of your job is not your only vertical of your job. And they're all very, very important. But to that point, I think there was a humongous shift in the business when I actually found this company. They're called Stage One Financial. They're literally amazing. I'll just plug them really quick. They're based out of California and Texas as well. And they are a full service finance team. So they do, our taxes and a bunch of, stuff that I have no idea how to do. But one of the services that they provide is that they have CFO support to young brands. So if you're a young brand and you can't afford a CFO or even frankly any C-suite title, like to hire one in-house, we're able to hourly have a CFO who, I love her. She's like grown the business in the last 2 years exponentially. So I think that's a big thing. And just team really in general is like hiring people and having people on your team and as your backers, whether they're, contractors or advisors or even just mentors who know so much more about their specific skill set than you do. And they can like teach you as much as you can teach them. I think that's super important.
How do you think about that split between the role of advisors, the role of consultants, and who you bring on board on your team? How have you kind of grown that ecosystem around you and assigned certain responsibilities to each, I guess?
Yeah. It's hard and it's always like a work in process. There was one point when we hired a sales associate, which was like, we were just kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall and trying to open up more wholesale accounts for revenue. And then quickly we were like, we don't need to be in every single store. We want to be in Sephora and, be very targeted about who we work with. So I think sometimes you hire people that you think are going to be right for the company, and it's just a learning experience as you go. But for Freck personally, or for Freck specifically, really when we look at like the verticals that really move the business forward, it's the marketing team and operations. So those are the two places that we've invested in-house. And then, of course, within those, we also have contractors, but that's really our full in-house team is marketing and ops. And then everything else is contractors at this point.
What does ops actually involve? Like what kind of people are in an ops team in a beauty company?
Yeah, so operations. So typically head of sales who runs your relationship with a vendor like Sephora would be in the marketing team, but my business partner and our COO, her background is in fashion distribution. So that was one of the reasons that I pulled her in after launch. And she is technically our head of sales. So she manages all of supply and demand planning, operations coordinator, which is like sending the POs through our 3PL. She manages our 3PL, which is a warehouse. She's also in product development with me. So she kind of ties over into marketing in certain ways. And then also, supply purchasing, making sure that things don't go out of stock, taxes, all that stuff, all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes that people don't necessarily think about when you look at a beauty brand.
You mentioned advisors before, and I just want to dig into that a little bit. Do you have like a formal kind of relationship with, you have an advisory group, or are they certain people that you've kind of been reaching out to as you've gone along and as the business has grown, or are they your investors? How does that work? Is it a formalized process or more intuitive?
It's definitely more intuitive, but then also when we were raising our seed round, we were super, super specific about not just raising money, raising smart money. So our two partners have a ton of experience in brand growth. One of them is very experienced in brand growth, and the other one is very experienced in scaling and exiting their investments, which is ultimately what we want to do with the business. So and within those two companies, obviously we have multiple advisors, multiple touch points within each one that I am on the phone with, probably too much. And they're like, Remi, stop calling me. And then also informally, I think all the way from, I'm very lucky. My uncle is a tech VC. So although he has no understanding of the beauty space whatsoever, he's really been helpful for me to understand like how to nurture and just honestly like take care of VC relationships, all the way down to literally like I would be remiss not to shout out my friends that I hang out with on the weekends and, watch football with. I mean, I'm not really into sports, but they are, who like listen to me, like just ramble on about work, because I think also like just the people in your life who are more removed are honestly, sometimes they can give the most like level-headed and fresh advice. So yeah, it's a mix between intuitive and formal. It's a long-winded answer.
Interesting. Yeah, I was really curious in how that kind of advisory ecosystem exists around you. I'm doing this course at the moment on fundraising with a company called Class Rebel, and it's been really helpful for me to kind of understand what their process looks like, but they kind of touch on more about at the Series A stage when you start giving away board seats, and then also differentiating between an advisory board, which doesn't necessarily have any control of the company in the same way that a traditional board would have, or a typical board would have, but they can come on and give advice and help, I guess, like steer the direction, but without any control. So I'm personally just like wrapping my head around that whole concept of advisors versus people who sit on the board. At the seed stage where you are now, how are you communicating with your investors, and what's their expectation about how businesses of your size should be spending their time on reporting versus actually growing the business? Like, I've been pretty surprised in the founders that I've spoken with to learn that it doesn't seem to be actually like a huge part of their roles in the early stage, this reporting piece. And it's not until kind of later on when you get into taking on VC money at kind of the Series A and beyond that reporting to investors becomes a really huge task. But at the seed level, what does that communication process look like?
Yeah, we do what we call a board light meeting. which is once every 3 months. And it's kind of like the state of the union address for the company. And then also kind of the next 3 months, which is something that's similar to, if you end up in Sephora, they want to see like every 6 months a check-in. So I think, it's more formal, but then literally I'm on the phone with like Will every day, and we text all day, every day, like all day, every day. But that was part of it. Like those are the investors that I chose to take because I was like, I need people in my corner who know way more than me. Of course, it's different for every investor.
And we've kind of like touched on the Sephora partnership a little bit, but can you talk us through how that came about? Did they find you? Did you find them? How did it happen?
Yeah, they hit us up, which was like the craziest day of my life. Des, my business partner and COO, called me. It's like screaming and was like, Sephora just emailed us. They want a meeting. And then, obviously like everyone's screaming. The whole team is like, like losing their like houses on fire. We're losing our mind. We're like ready to pop bottles. And then we're like, oh, holy hell, we have a lot of work to do. So obviously, it's a better position to be in when Sephora reaches out to you. But we had definitely tried to reach them before. We had sent them packages. We had done everything. But I think we just, they found us probably from Instagram. And it sounded like they had been watching us for quite a while, seeing how the proof of concept laid out. So for anybody who's listening who, is feeling like, why hasn't Sephora reached out to us? They might just be watching you.
What kind of things did you have to show them when they kind of reached out? Like, what did they ask to see, and why do you think that they were attracted to the brand? I mean, I can see why they're attracted to the brand, but what were some of the things that they were kind of pointing to?
Yeah. Well, they were still the only freckle product at Sephora. So I think they're like, oh, wow, this is like, this is really taken off here, these freckles, which is true. It's like, they can't stop. We have all these other amazing products and the other products are doing well. But I was like, there must be a point where the freckles plateau because everyone in the world has tried freckles and they're just like, keep going. It's crazy. Anyways. So, in preparation for Sephora, we put together like basically a marketing deck. And like, to be totally honest, we were not ready for Sephora at all. So we didn't even have a positioning statement. I would say that was probably like half of the work was in preparation for the initial meeting, was literally kind of like taking a really long, hard look in the mirror and being like, who is this brand? What are we? And so now after hours and hours of like the labor of like trying to talk about yourself, which is so hard for some people and certainly me. Our positioning statement now is Freck Beauty is an attitude. We're bold, clean beauty for anyone who cares about ingredients, respects the process, and doesn't care about the rules. But that sentence right there, that was 1 month of like tears and sweat. So that was really like the hardest thing that we had to figure out is like who we are and who we're talking to and why we are different than any of the other brands that want to be in Sephora.
Is that like an internal process where you are brainstorming with the team, talking with, your close-knit community, or is that something that you're going out with like formal surveys to ask consumers about what they think you are?
It's internal. It's like, I mean, I think that there are, if you're a more seasoned entrepreneur, that's probably the first thing that you're going to figure out is like, why do we deserve to exist in the beauty market? That's not what I did because I'm not a seasoned entrepreneur, or I wasn't at the time. So ideally if you can already figure that out, that's a great spot to start. But, yeah, it's definitely internal. And I think it's like one of those things where you can always get feedback from your community and that can affect, e-commerce behavior. It can affect product development and tone of voice. There are so many things that can be from your community. But I think that in order to have a strong enough position in the market, like you really need to know what you're saying as opposed to waiting for someone else to tell you.
Absolutely. And the last question that I really love to ask is just if you can share a resource, whether it's a podcast, a book, an app, a tool, something that's kind of helped you along your path to where you guys are now in the business and that has helped you as a founder that you would recommend to others?
Everybody needs to go to therapy. Literally, I will shout it from the top of the mountain 1,000 times. Therapy, 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 therapy. Everybody needs to go to therapy. Yeah. What that looks like for you is different. If therapy is yoga, if therapy is, listening to a podcast that is about, leadership. But I just think that like, it's so easy to get wrapped up in all of the little stuff, packing orders, driving to the ports, like, getting on the call with like somebody who you're waiting from a shipment, like all those things. It's like, that's all lost if you're not working on your personal development. So that's like big picture. And then one thing that I will plug is I get about 1,000 emails a day. No, like 500, 600 emails a day. And I use an email client called Superhuman. And it is the best money it's $1 a day. It's the best dollar I spend every single day. I get through my email 2 or 3 times as fast. It's all key commands, and I'm a weird key command nerd. So if anyone's having trouble executing and just bandwidth wise with emails, Superhuman is your friend.
That's a great recommendation. I completely agree with that one. Superhuman's awesome. And people want to find you, they want to find Freck Beauty. Where should they go?
Yeah. I love hearing from you guys. So if you want to DM me, my personal Instagram is hi.remi, Remi. Freck is on Instagram at FRECK and on TikTok at Freck Beauty.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun.
Thanks for tuning into that conversation with Remi. I hope you really enjoyed it. She has a ton of great insights. I love when founders get super tactical about their stories. It just, honestly, that's what you need when you're first starting out. You just need to hear what other people have done and what's worked for them. So thank you, Remi, for that one. If you haven't left us a review, that's how people find the show. So please, wherever you listen, 5 stars, much appreciated. And I'll see you at the next episode.